War Pugs. So today we're going to be listening to Carnage. It's an EVERSOR story, which is kind of relevant considering that I'm releasing my first video on the Officio Assassinorum. So, I saw that Woos had requested this in the Discord. I was like, well, let's give it a shot. Guys, this is Vox in the Void. We know this is going to be good. And with his style of storytelling, the sheer fact that this is about an EVERSOR, this is about to be absolutely brutal. War Pugs, buckle up, Buttercup. It's time for a ride. Let's get right into it. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is something that, yeah. Let loose the rise and call the war. I don't even want to do a big introduction for this because, my god, this is going to be good.
In the grim darkness of the far future where only war prevails, the symbols of the Adeptus Astartes, legendary warriors known as Space Marines, are revered across the galaxy. Introducing the Astartes chapter pin badges from Starforged, a collection that brings the iconic heraldry of the Emperor's chosen sons to your side.
Very nice.
Each pin badge is a masterful creation, meticulously crafted to capture the essence of the chapter it represents. From the ferocious wolves of Fenris to the relentless fury of the Blood Angels, every design tells a tale of honor, sacrifice, and unyielding duty.
This is very nice.
Whether you are a collector, a devoted fan of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, or a warrior in spirit, these badges are more than just accessories. They are a symbol of allegiance to the Imperium.
Nice. Guys, this will be linked in the description below. What else can I say? Get yourself a pin. Carnage.
His first face belongs to a child. Ashen white skin taut against pinched cheeks and hunger-pang ribs. He's cold. He wants to get warm. There's no more reason to it than that. The other children scream as he drives a pair of scissors into Sister Charity's jugular.
Ugh.
He is weak, much weaker than he will become. The scissors puncture skin, but not the thick cartilage of trachea, and he stabs the nun half a dozen more times before she falls with a gargled splutter.
Well, this is starting off.
He leaps onto her body, plunging the bloody scissors again and again into her neck. The blood splatters across his face. It feels sticky. It feels warm. He takes his second face in that moment. It still possesses the features of a child, but the pale drawn skin has become crimson red and dripping. Drip, drip, dripping to the rhythm of his panting breath.
Well, this is starting off rather friendly.
The other children scream, but they don't flee, frozen in their terror. He falls upon them with the scissors, emptying their bodies until the blankets of blood swaddle him from his head to his feet. Then there is pain, a blossoming agony across the stomach, and he falls, clutching at a gunshot wound. He barely remembers the interrogations that follow, but he remembers telling them that he had been cold, that he had wanted to get warm. The grim-faced warden never seems to believe him. They keep asking the same questions, waiting for a different answer. It all changes when the boy sees his reflection in a metal cup. He howls like an animal. They have removed his second face with water and soap, and he no longer recognizes what he sees. Terrified by his own mutilation, he rams the metal cup into the warden's face, lacerating their cornea with the sharp edge of its rim. As the warden bellows in pain, the boy clamps his teeth on their neck and rips out their throat. He feels the blood cascade across him. He feels as his face returns to him, and then unconsciousness returns as well, in the form of cracking blows against the back of his skull. The next few years are remembered in spasmed fits of half-grasped memory. His body is racked by the violent cocktail of a madman's science, his blood replaced with raging chemicals and his innards swapped out with foreign organs. When he tries to eat, he vomits, its expulsions fizzing and burning against the bubbling metal of the grated floor. Sometimes he becomes explosively angry and breaks the bones in his hands against whatever surface is nearby. As his body changes, instructors with shadows for faces tutor him alongside other children. He learns how human beings can be disassembled with a few cuts of a sword and where they can be emptied with a single thrust. He learns where to find the blood vessels that carry poison to a human's heart. He learns how to withstand relentless pain and how to function with bruises and fractured bones. He learns how to make a dozen tactical decisions in 1/10 of a second. He learns how to disappear into darkness and stare out from the black. He learns how to use the lethality of his refashioned body. His training is practical, tactile. The instructors allow him to apply his learning in the testing yard, and he almost cries in joy when he rediscovers his face in the steaming guts of another child. He is so ecstatic that he tries to kill one of the instructors, and even though they collapse his throat with a single punch, they seemed pleased. As he runs out of breath and his vision dim.
Welcome to 40K. Welcome to 40K. Oh god. Yeah, this is exactly how I was expecting. This is exactly, and I mean exactly how I was expecting this to be. Just this level of horrifying. Let's go.
He scratches his nails along the instructor's radial artery and splits it open to the warm rush of pumping blood. When he awakes in the Medicaid bay, he dislocates his thumbs to escape his restraints. He kills half the medical staff before he is brought down by shock truncheons and gas bombs. In the last year, there are only 2 pupils left. No longer boys, but young men. The instructors have to physically separate them whenever they see each other. They both fall into a murderous rage. The instructors tell them that they will soon have their chance and that the survivor will earn the right to a new face fashioned of plated bone. He wants that face.
Yep.
He wants it more than anything else in the world. They meet in the testing yard. A single blunted knife is thrown into the dirt between them. They need no further encouragement. In the melee that follows, the 2 teenagers stab and claw and bite. They rip chunks of flesh off each other and trade fractures for fractures, gouges for gouges. The knife tastes both of them, and the blunted blade snaps off between ribs as it is driven from one heart to another. The survivor pauses. He has forgotten which of the 2 young men he is. He no longer recognizes the face of the corpse before him, or his own reflection in the pools of blood. As he collapses, exhausted and almost spilled empty, he asks himself whether he is the one losing consciousness or the one with a blade in his ribs. He never learns the answer, but he forgets the question. They give him his 3rd and final face. He holds his new reflection in his hands, a grinning, lipless skull, thirsting for blood and carnage and death. When he dons the helm, he feels that face possess him. His essence burns in addiction, longing for mayhem and slaughter. He is the EVERSOR now. He closes his eyes. That may have been minutes ago. It may have been centuries ago.
Time to wake up. Go to work.
He awakes in a banquet hall occupied by aristocratic portraits and long red banners. The roof is caved in from the force of his delivery pod, which vomits him forwards with a flashing green light of gleeful urgency. He is wearing his 3rd face and dressed in skin-tight black, needles sticking into his flesh and depositing lurid elixirs into his raging blood. One hand is a taloned claw made of syringes. The other naturally longs for the stylized, 2-barreled pistol at his hip. He moves, faster than anything should move. It doesn't look real, like a buffering image on a picked screen. He shudders from one position to another without any sense of movement in between. They've noticed the drop pod. They know he's here, but he's already at the door.
For all of you who don't know what an EVERSOR is, it is one of the 4 primary clades that are unclassified of the Officio Assassinorum. And when an EVERSOR gets sent to your planet, there's a message that's being sent here. And that message is, do you see what's happening here? If you see what's happening here, you don't want to repeat what they were doing, because Daddy is pissed at everyone. and Daddy is now spanking everyone. And if you're within 5 kilometers of where this is happening, you should have been running from the second that you noticed the fire coming down from the sky.
When the first guard steps through, the Eversor twists the 7 vertebrae in their neck at an angle of 180 degrees, snapping the spinal cord and killing his prey in a single motion. Another guard runs up the corridor. They go for a Vox unit on their belt, seemingly in slow motion as the Eversor draws his pistol in real time. He puts 2 needles in the femoral vein of his victim's thigh. The neurotoxins work swiftly, and the guard dances like a puppet on a string as their nerves misfire and send diseased signals to nearby muscles. A moment later, and the poison reaches their heart. The organ bloats into a grotesque swell before it pops, and the guard drops dead from a catastrophic aneurysm. He reaches the body before it hits the ground, covering 80 meters in a couple of seconds. His metabolism burns. Steam is captured inside his bodysuit and fed back into his blood to prevent immediate, incapacitating dehydration. The air shimmers where he has sprinted through. He turns the corner. More guards are coming. He counts them in the fraction of a second. 6. One limps on a bruised leg. Another is high on a combat substance, their eyes dilated beyond natural levels. He notices these things, and a dozen more. A burst of mass-reactive rounds scatters the group as 3 heads explode in a messy display of skull fragments and brain soup. The Eversor chases after his bolt rounds. To build momentum, he leaps from wall to wall, and when he jumps from one side to the other, he fires another burst and blows out someone's stomach. The stench of digestive organs cuts through the physaline stink of his discharged weapon. The guard on combat drugs is fast enough to fire a single shot. The barrage of chems quickening their reaction time, even as it savages their organs from the inside out.
Not enough.
A las round whips towards the Eversor, and he draws his power sword mid-flight, the blade absorbing the round within the molecular dissonance of its power field. He is on them now, and he swings the weapon such that it cuts through the left hip of his enemy, slicing along the innominate bone of their pelvis and out the other side. The guard falls, bisected, his 2 halves spinning off against the superhuman force of the strike. The same swing of the Eversor's blade sheaths it in his scabbard, and he pounces on the final guard, punching 5 needles into their jugular vein and combat rolling to the side. He does not stop to see if the neuro gauntlet has killed his target. The guard screams a bubbling, grotesque shriek as their skin boils and their muscles decay into malformed slurry. The Eversor keeps moving forwards, faster than the death he brings. The boom of bolt rounds has not gone unnoticed. Security.
Well, that was about a little surprise that I got. Hopefully coming. We will find out. I'll tell you guys if it comes. If it doesn't, well, I won't. Here we go.
Security procedures activate. Procedures that the Eversor knows intimately without understanding how he knows. Some work to his favor, others to his disadvantage. He lets the old and the children gather in the safe room of the south wing. It will save him the effort of chasing them down. Instead, he sprints west. He will cut off his targets at the central stairway before they reach the lander on the building's roof. He is the grinning face of death that blurs along crimson carpets and marble flooring. He is the monster that haunts beneath carven ceilings and against wainscot walls. He meets them in the main hall. The final bolt rounds in the chamber kills 2 of his targets and mortally wounds a 3rd. They are on the mezzanine above him, and instead of scaling the stairs, he simply jumps from the ground floor to among them. 2 more are dead before he has fully landed, beheaded where his power sword has cut through the atlas bones. Another dies when he pumps a needle into their left gastric vein, clutching at their stomach as it swells and bulges before their eyes. Discounting the mortally wounded man, 4 remain. One is a young athletic woman with a noble bearing and a power sword in her hands, the hilt gilded and shaped into the raging maw of a mythical dragon. 2 are dressed in the robes of adepts, their mouths opening into terrified screams. The last is a bodyguard in well-fitted carapace with a melter gun aiming up towards the Eversor. 5 things happen in under a second. The noblewoman lunges. Her sword arm is confident, her footwork is exceptional. But that doesn't matter. That is the first. The EVERSOR sheaths his sword and pivots, allowing the woman's blade to sail 3 centimeters from his chest. This is the second. He steps inwards, putting himself inside the woman's reach and seizing her sword arm with the full grip of his neuro gauntlet.
Oh no.
The injectors pump poison into her basilic vein, and she opens her mouth in readiness to scream. The third. His grip on the woman's sword arm, he spins them both about and plants her weapon into the bodyguard's torso. The power field breaks apart the carapace at a molecular level and opens his skin, carving through the sternum and popping the man's thymus gland beneath. The fourth. The EVERSOR pivots again. He is still holding the woman's sword arm.
Oh my God.
Movement causes an olecranon fracture along her elbow as her sword cuts sideways through the bodyguard's chest. The blade slices through atria of the man's heart, and its heat causes blood chambers to swell as it carves a path through the superior lobe of the left lung. The fifth. The bodyguard drops. The noblewoman howls as the neurotoxins transforms her into something less than human. The EVERSOR empties the rest of his pistol's needles into the 2 adepts, and they join the dead. He stoops over the mortally wounded man with his grinning skeletal mask and watches as they bleed out from the carotid artery in their throat. He does not stay long. More guards are coming, and though he intends to kill them, his position on the mezzanine is exposed. He reloads in one smooth, practiced movement. He allows them to chase him into the portrait hall. He knows the layout of this palace better than they do. He funnels them into the narrow space. He will paint the portraits with their blood. There are 2 doors. To avoid being flanked, he transforms the battlefield into a 3-dimensional space. Each portrait is lit from above by a gargoyle holding a candle. He leaps up and runs the gambit of repulsive stone faces, his sword severing each pillar of wax so that the hall is gripped by an oppressive gloom.
Dude.
He disappears in the darkness and stares out from the black. The doors open. Narrow lines of illumination cut into the hallway, stabbing at the painted faces of old aristocracy. But they do not reach the center of the room, nor beyond the carnival shadows of the hideous gargoyles. The EVERSOR watches as 2 squads slowly advance towards one another. They do not have stab lights, and they are terrified of the central darkness. He smells the sweat beading from eccrine glands, feels the fast beat of hearts, sees the wide dilation of pupils.
You just gotta nope out at some points in life. You just have to turn around and be like, nope.
Their adrenal glands are working on overtime, generating a fight or flight response, simultaneously focusing and dulling their minds into making quick, unconsidered decisions. The EVERSOR silently unhooks one of the syringes that has emptied body-straining chems into his heart and throws it into the central darkness. The sudden movement activates an already overworking amygdala, which sends an immediate distress signal to a hypothalamus. An automatic nervous system goes into overdrive. Adrenal glands pump faster and faster. Small airways in the lungs open wide. Pulse rate increases. Blood pressure rises. A quick, unconsidered decision is made. A guard opens fire. The whip crack of his las gun twitches further trigger fingers, and now both squads are shooting. Beams of light banishing the darkness in the center of the hall. But there is no one there. No figure to absorb those beams of light in the form of cauterizing heat. The las rounds whip through to the other side, and both squads fire on each other. They are at close range, firing with semi-automatic weapons in a narrow corridor. After a second or two, they have stopped shooting, but already 9 of them are dead, and 6 more are injured. The EVERSOR descends. He lands behind the remnants of the first squad. He lands low, like a cat. In one fluid motion, he hooks the door closed with his left foot, draws his sword and sweeps it across the ankles of 3 men. The power field parts skin, muscle and tibia bone, and 3 men scream as they are divested of their feet. There is firing, but the EVERSOR is millimeters from the ground, and the las rounds pitch crippled, footless men to the wet carpet. The EVERSOR draws his pistol and fires a semi-automatic burst of mass-reactive rounds, and the 2 remaining combatants are shredded as their ribs snap apart to form jagged shrapnel through their internal organs. One by one, the EVERSOR meets each survivor and pricks them with the index finger of his neuro gauntlet.
Oh,
he
dude,
chooses a
come
different
on.
vein for each victim. A cephalic vein, a radial vein, a saphenous vein.
Okay, now you're just showing off, my guy.
A femoral vein, a gastric vein, a thoracic vein, He is beginning to tire. He is on a concoction of murderous elixirs that overextend his body to the brink of explosive death. He shudders with pleasure as the systems in his bodysuit activate another needle, and another dose of shivering frenzy spills into his blood. He heads for the safe room. He does not meet any more guards. By his count, there are only 2 left, and they are likely with the old and the children. But this doesn't mean that the hallways are unoccupied. The EVERSOR murders 24 serving staff along the way, leaving each behind as a mutilated, swollen corpse. The safe room door is concealed by wallpaper, a swimming pattern of flowers and thorns. The disguise is useless. He already knows where the safe room is, and in any case, he would have noticed the narrow fissures along the walls. He fixes a melter bomb in the center of the door. The vault is ceramite and plasteel, but the explosive is powerful, and the barrier will fail. He sets it for 5 seconds and paces at the edge of the blast radius, skull-socket eyes strained and thirsting. It feels like an eternity before the bomb explodes. Both guards are too close to the breach. The blast overpressure ruptures their eyes, savages their middle ears, and causes abdominal hemorrhage and perforation. They suffer fatal brain injuries and die instantly, along with an old woman clinging to a rosewood walking stick. The rest endure a variety of lesser symptoms that leave them blind, deaf, concussed, or bleeding. If not for the EVERSOR, many of these injuries would be fatal. The EVERSOR sprints inside.
He's got to make sure it's going to be fatal, though.
He makes a slaughter of them. They are children and the elderly. None of them attempt to fight back. He transforms their bodies into something greater than the sum of their mangled parts, a monument to blood and trailing nerves, an ode to screams and tearing muscles, an exhibit of carnage and absolute evisceration. This is the part he likes best. He clothes himself in their paint and drapes their tattered skin over his shuddering shoulders. He laughs. He is ecstatic. It feels warm. It is done. He allows himself a single moment to appreciate his art before he rushes away. He investigates every room and every corridor, and he kills every living thing he finds. He cuts apart servants, nursemaids, and house cats. He drives his sword along walkways and watches the power field ignite wainscoting into merry flames. Smoke taxes his augmented lungs. He is tired. The final syringe has emptied into him, and he is almost dry. He returns to the drop pod in the banquet hall and steps inside. The EVERSOR closes his eyes. He awakes in a muddy field. He is already under fire. Las rounds scour the ceramite of his drop pod. He rolls into the gradient of a natural ditch as heavy bolters fill the air with high-caliber mass-reactive rounds. The syringes that connect to his circulatory system are refilled and pumping a heady mixture of chems that slow time and sharpen his reflexes to inhuman levels. He feels it in his blood, axons sparking across his nervous system, his twin hearts beating thrice its normal rate. The concentration is potent. It is probably lethal. He is not expected to survive. The EVERSOR is not afraid. He is rabid, an animal with the tactical ability of an overcharged cogitator. Within that unnatural dichotomy, there is no room for the fear of death. And yet, he is troubled by the cold sensation of hormonal boosters reacting with the hemoglobin in his veins. He feels cold. He wants to feel warm. He springs from the ditch and runs across open field. He moves faster than he ever has before. He sees bolts and las rounds and simply steps around them as they fly sluggishly past. He fires his own bolts. His aim is so precise and his timing so impeccable that each mass reactive impacts with enemy ammunition milliseconds after they are fired, triggering chain explosions that transform heavy bolter barrels into useless, churning metal. He sprints across 100 meters of uneven ground in 2.4 seconds. His bodysuit briefly catches fire from atmospheric compression, but he is too hopped up on the chems to notice the agony of his second-degree burns and welcomes the heat. His muscles are burning too, pushed to the very limits of physical and biological possibility. The detonation of the weapon placements has scattered the firing line of cultists.
Oh my god.
He empties his pistol into their milling ranks, bolt rounds separating them into meaty chunks as others convulse and bulge to the neurotoxins of his needles. They panic. their fire discipline evaporates.
Yeah.
They push at each other as they flee down their trenches, and he sails overhead like a hunting bird in swooping flight.
Yeah.
The soles of his feet barely touch the ground. Most of his bodysuit has burned away, and great patches of red sore scar tissue are on display. Bumpy, knitted flesh and scabbing burn wounds. He sees his target, and the final syringe injects directly into a swelling tachycardia heart. He draws his power sword. Its super dense core weighs 3 times that of any other weapon of its type. It may even weigh more than the crackling Crozius of his enemy, a Chaos Astartes, a dark apostle of the word. It does not matter. The target opens his mouth to voice a blasphemy that the EVERSOR automatically files as tactically irrelevant. His crimson armor is littered with tattered parchment, perverse purity scrolls nailed through the ceramite and scribbled on in minuscule lettering. He does not wear a helmet. This, the EVERSOR files as tactically relevant.
Tactically relevant, yes.
Irregular-shaped horns preventing such adornments. His accursed Crozius is an 8-flanged mace within a spitting power field, ridden with sorcerous energies. Its shaft bears the names of the Neverborn, infusing the weapon with further demonic power. The EVERSOR is upon the Apostle before he finishes his dark prayer. The power sword cuts towards the Astartes' right flank. The Crozius moves to block, and the EVERSOR redirects his swing, reversing its momentum. His biceps tear under the immense strain, but he lands his sword in the space between the Apostle's groin guard and his left leg. It is where the armor is flexible to allow full range of movement, and it is where the armor is weakest. The super heavy power sword cuts through the mobility folds and severs the word bearer's leg in a single chop.
Bye-bye.
He knows that this will not kill his target. Even now, the Laraman's organ is releasing transhuman cells to the site of the mutilation, reacting with white blood cells and the air to form thick scar tissue across the stump. Space Marines do not die of exsanguination.
No, they don't.
But they can lose balance. Between the force of the EVERSOR's strike and the sudden amputation of his leg, the Dark Apostle topples to the muddy ground. He roars in fury. He sweeps up his Crozius, but the EVERSOR has already combat rolled away to absorb the momentum of his charge. The combat roll brings the EVERSOR back onto his feet. He leaps into the air and angles down his sword. He contorts mid-jump to clear another swing of the accursed Crozius and lands his thrust into the Apostle's throat. The power field carves through thickened, unarmored skin. The blade punctures a ceramite-hardened trachea. Its point buries itself in the wet earth, forming a pivot between sword, ground, and bearer. When the EVERSOR hits the ground, he yanks hard on the hilt. The blade slices along the pivot, half decapitating the word bearer as the sword returns to the fizzling air. The Apostle splutters acid, a Betcher's gland is split, and the blood bubbles as the Space Marine chokes on his own venom. The Astartes writhes, his lips forming a silent prayer. His body shudders with racking force. It begins to rise upwards. The EVERSOR can feel the chems in his body steaming through his pores. The syringes are empty. He begins to feel the torture of his burns and the ripping of his muscles. He feels his blood pressure plummet as his enlarged heart struggle. It feels cold. With the last strength he has left, he launches into the air and plants his power sword into the chest of the rising Apostle. He is weak now, and he strikes where the armor is strongest. It is not a mortal blow, but it still parts ceramite, black carapace and skin, and causes the fused ribcage beneath to bubble and partially melt. The word bearer is chanting. His words are audible, even though he no longer has a throat. The EVERSOR continues to smile. His third and final face is always smiling. He feels the metabolic carnage of his imminent death react with the onslaught drugs within him. His eyes gleam as a hideous soup of unnatural hormones and grotesque chems meet with explosive force, transforming his dying flesh into a chemical bomb. Melter bombs primed for this very moment detonate simultaneously. The power field in his sword erupts. His executioner pistol ignites. To all onlookers, it is a blazing eruption of brilliant destructive light. The EVERSOR disappears in acrid fire, and the Dark Apostle is transformed into a collection of bloody giblets that rain down on the muddy ground. But this is not what the EVERSOR perceives. He perceives much more. His glands are where the most powerful combustions begin. He feels them swell until the lining gives way and toxic gas spurts freely about his body. His skin stretches like an overinflated balloon as other organs ignite in poisonous fire. His muscles are fuel to that growing conflagration as his skin tears and his body pops. The detonation is unleashed from within to without, just as 3 melter bombs blow and form 3 spiraling corkscrews of flame. The blast overpressure accelerates the tearing of his expanding body and wrenches open the punctured ceramite of the Dark Apostle. That same force pops their eyes into putrid jelly. It causes the Eversor's brain to slam into the skull with such force that his brainstem is partially severed from his spinal cord. That is when he stops perceiving. That is when he truly ends. His last thought is simple and joyous. His last thought is that he feels warm.
Warpugs, sheer fact of the matter, 100% sheer fact of the matter, an Eversor assassin is a walking, breathing, living weapon of mass destruction. That is all they are. An Eversor is just... it's so past overkill that it borders on abject absurdity. Sending an Eversor in to do a mission, you either want something that cannot be killed to die, or you want to send a message of such abject brutality that it can't be mistaken as to the reason that you sent this thing forward. Warpugs, Vox did an amazing job putting this story into words as far as, you know, the narration of it. The author did an amazing job of actually putting down what you would expect from an Eversor, because an Eversor is not going to be someone that you can talk to. You can't rationalize with this thing. It is no longer... it's no longer sentient in ways that we would think about sentience. It is a creature of simple needs. In fact, in the entire history of the Eversor, there's only been 2 Eversors that I know of that can actually be capable of carrying on a conversation for any amount of time whatsoever. Most Eversors are just like this guy. They are found, trained, and then they are cryogenically frozen until they are needed. Because you don't want an Eversor out and about walking around. You want them under strict control, or you want them sedated and so heavily restrained that, you know, not even a Primarch could break out. Because these things are... Eversors are, without a doubt in my head, if you want to kill a Space Marine, look no further. You're not going to find many things that I can say, regardless of the Space Marine in question, that could kill that Space Marine. That list is, for 40k, is relatively short compared to other things. I mean, if you can list 50 things, if you can list 100 things in 40k that could kill a singular being, then that list is short. Well, an Eversor is on that list no matter what it is you're talking about. An Eversor could take care of it in face-to-face combat. I wouldn't think that the Dark Apostle, the Word Bearer, could actually force an Eversor into detonating themselves, but I can see why he did. I didn't see... Maybe there was something I overlooked as far as wording or something like that that would let me know that the Eversor had been fighting for so long that eventually there was no real way around it. But at the end of the day, the Eversor are meant to go in and create as much havoc as they can possibly do. And if for any reason the Eversor fails in the mission, you still don't walk away from it. Like, if the Eversor dies, everything controlling the biochemistry that is at work within the Eversor is going to fail, and it has explosive results. Warpugs, Vox in the Void. what more can I say about Vox and the Void? You really would like, I'll tell you this, if you enjoyed this, you would love some of his other stuff, so I would highly recommend going to his channel, checking him out. Subscribe to him, subscribe to me if you haven't already. Leave me a comment down below, join the channel as a member, or a Patreon. Guys, I'll catch you next time.